Alright, so what's up, everybody? Thank you so much for tuning in. Tonight is Woke Wednesdays. We do this every single Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm very excited. We have a dynamic duo tonight representing one struggle. So excited to have them on the show. Brilliant young people, students. Would you like to introduce yourselves? Who are y'all?
Yeah, thanks for having us. I'm Allie. I'm an FIU student and a member of One Struggle. I study theater.
I am Austin. I am also a student at FIU. I'm graduating in December, sociology.
Congratulations. So excited to have them on the show. They've been on the show before, and tonight we're talking about capitalism and its relation to y'all's president, Trump. And definitely can't wait to get started. And if this is your first time tuning in, please feel free to ask questions, post comments. If you have any doubts, any concerns, if you didn't understand something, please feel free to ask, and we'll try our best to answer all your questions and address all your comments. So, y'all ready to get started?
Yeah, let's do it.
So what is capitalism?
Yeah, so we want to talk about kind of the rise of Trump and fascism, and I think you can't have that conversation without understanding capitalism, because Trump is an effect of something that's happening on a political and economic and social level, right? So it's not just Trump, it's capitalism. And a lot of people, we live under capitalism, but a lot of us don't have an understanding of what it is. It is an economic system, but it also shows a social relationship. So it's a class-divided society where wealth for some classes, aka the capitalist class, it depends on the exploitation of the international working class. So here in the United States, we have a lot of luxury, a lot of wealth, but that comes from an international working class. The reason that this economic system can exist is that lots of people around the globe have to be exploited, and that's the working class, the people who build our couches, our clothing, and are exploited so that capitalists, even before those profits are sold, before those commodities are sold, there is profit that exists in that exploitation. Because if you pay somebody 20 cents to produce a couch that costs $200, already you've made your fucking value, you know? And that's kind of the exploitation of capitalism, that it's the fundamental motor that drives capitalism, is that exploitation of the ruling class against the working class.
So real quick, we are talking about capitalism tonight, and I see new folks getting on. So again, if you have any questions about anything, please let us know, because sometimes we might throw a term, just kind of throw terms around here and there.
Yeah.
And another might be a little bit complicated, so please don't hesitate to ask. A commodity, for example, is something that just can be sold, right? It is made.
Yeah, it's something that someone somewhere in a factory creates. You know, our clothing is created in factories.
Phones.
Our phones, yeah. For example, the newest iPhone costs $1,000.
Yeah.
So the Chinese workers who assemble it are paid $1.50 an hour, and the people who are mining the minerals necessary, the Congolese workers, are paid even less than that, pennies. So you have this commodity that's, $1,000, but people who have produced it and created it, who are paid virtually nothing. But
so real quick, can we recap real quick?
Yeah.
So capitalism, the way we're defining it, and definitely let me know if I got this, is an economic system, right, that creates classes, social classes, economic classes, that is kind of predicated upon, or it needs exploitation of poor people, of workers, in order to kind of exist.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then that kind of brings us to capitalism. Another feature is it has to expand. So we talk about things like imperialism, what does that mean? It's a natural outgrowth of capitalism requiring I've got to go get more resources. I have to go get exploitable labor. So especially in the United States, you see a lot of that, whether it's in Haiti or Latin America. People United States going in and either toppling governments or, redistributing economic systems so that it works in the favor of us, and this constant growth, always, we live on a finite planet. So, we're seeing environmental catastrophe, climate change, and yeah, capitalism will do anything that it takes to continue expanding, as we've seen, because realistically, we could stop production and the earth could maybe recover, but, that's not an option because capitalism,
And part of this is also kind of this, and we're kind of talking and hitting features, kind of tenets of capitalism.
Yeah.
Right? So this is like a concept, an ideology, right? It's not like a person. We are all complicit in this economic system. And one of its features is, so some of the features are exploitation.
Yes.
Right? It is ever expanding. It has to kind of just, it just kind of proliferates.
Yeah.
And there's some other features, right?
Yeah. I think also, where should we go from this? Sorry, y'all. It is a really heavy and dense theory topic.
We can talk about industrial capital and finance capital?
Yeah, okay. Oh, yeah, so that's great. So, we, One Struggle have taken the position that capitalism is in crisis. And we don't just say that because, it does require exploitation, which is true, or because it does have to expand, which is true. But right now, the industrial production of capitalism, that stuff that we talked about, the commodities, the couches, that's where capitalism lives and thrives. But there's also finance capital, which is speculation. None of it is real or tangible or attached to real goods. But it is a really easy way to make profit for capitalists. But it also toxifies the economic kind of environment. Because sorry.
You're like speaking cursive. I'm like trying to follow. All right. So we're saying there are two types of capital. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Within this structure of capitalism, right? Which is, you said finance capital.
Yeah.
What was the other?
Industrial, which is that's the backbone of capitalism, the industrial revolution, like creating commodities, goods.
Okay. So we have that. That's the backbone, and then.
Yeah, this newer, more recent form of capital, which is like financial accumulation, like
interest, debt, speculation. The 2008 financial crisis.
Yeah, so the same companies like Home Depot, who might produce like a bunch of lumber for people to buy. They also have a credit card, that you can become indebted to them, and they profit off of that debt too. So it's this weird intermingling of both real and not real. And it kind of fucks up the economic system.
So we have a question.
Yeah.
Sohail is asking, but capitalism has provided those jobs to Chinese workers. Then we're talking about making iPhones. The main reason for economic growth in China is because of a switch from a planned economy, communism, to a mixed economy. I think people twist words like exploitation, but it actually has helped many developing countries. So what are your thoughts?
I would disagree. I would say that, we're talking about China, but even Haiti, for example, the reasons that we go into those countries and kind of disrupt economies or give them jobs, the circumstances are a lot more horrific than we might think. Like in Haiti specifically, like grain dumping, U.S. imperial forces came in and dumped a bunch of rice, so that local rice sellers can't sell their rice anymore. And what's a great alternative for them is the U.S. will set up an industrial park in Port-au-Prince, a place for people to go work in factories. And I don't think that capitalism realistically goes around the world seeking to do good and give people these jobs that they need. And
it's done through force.
Yeah, it's done through force. It's horrific. And even if those Chinese workers who have those jobs are grateful for them, which, they have to survive, it's not necessarily a good thing, that they're being exploited so heavily. Even if they do get paid $1.50 an hour, which likely isn't enough to feed their families or pay their rent.
And I think part of what we're saying is that this economic ideology, right? And again, please let us know if we're just throwing around terms.
Yeah, it's a heavy, dense topic.
It's a dense topic. Please just kind of let us know, because I think all of us can kind of speak to an experience where we've been exploited to a certain degree. Yeah. One of the arguments here, if I'm understanding this correctly, is that literally human life, right? Your physicality, your materiality, your body is reduced to something less than human for the purposes of just economic transactions.
Yeah, for profit.
For profit. And once you are viewed less than human, there's something that we can do to you, right? We can exploit you. And exploit, sometimes speaking about things is a way of abstracting realities. And I think when you see the way exploitation actually works out, it's probably one of the most visceral things that just kind of conjures up something in you, which is extremely horrible, and it can lead, and oftentimes does lead to death.
Yeah.
Right? We're talking about murdering people.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, like those jobs that we're talking about, those aren't, you know, like maybe people have to work them to survive, because we all have to work to survive. We have to live within capitalism, but also it's awful conditions with severe repression, with lots of Chinese workers seriously becoming suicidal because they can't afford to live anywhere, they can't afford to eat. So
talk about the iPhone factory. They're working meticulously for more than 15 hours a day on little tiny electronics, and they're burning chemicals that they have to breathe in, and it's giving them all kinds of cancer and different respiratory diseases. This isn't nice work.
Yeah,
they're doing 70 hours a week,
and those results don't matter to capitalists.
Yeah.
You know,
We live in this society that has this puts cupidity, this love of money, right at the forefront of human life. And once you do that, seriously, like, what else do we have? We can talk about slavery within the context of the United States, right? Even contemporary forms of slavery, mass incarceration, that again puts economics and human at the forefront of human life, before human life.
yeah.
And that's kind of what we're kind of getting at ultimately, right?
Exactly. And just to kind of say that we are at this point within the economic system where it's bumping up with the physical limits of this world. You can only extract so many resources. You can only exploit so much. You can only create so much profit before there is going to be class disparity, and that there's no more room, you know, for anything for people to survive without paying out the fucking nose for it, you know? And that's where we are in capitalism. This is an economic system that may have been able to give things to people or let people live in a relatively nice way, especially here in the United States for a while. But it's in a stage where it can't handle that anymore just as an economic base, because it's running out of room. It's running out of markets, exploitable markets.
I mean, just look at the top 1% kind of controls, right, or has more money and wealth than everyone else, right? And this is within the context of the United States, American imperialism, and all this. We do have a question, I think. Let me see. Am I missing something? So let me read some of these points. One struggle is saying imperialism is the natural expansion of capitalism. Oh yes, we had a great thing. Therapy for Latinx, amazing Instagram page. Please feel free to follow them. They're saying this is a great combo, especially with Black Friday coming up.
Yeah,
right. So
true.
maybe we can make this a little bit more tangible.
Yeah.
And digestible by kind of relating capitalism to Black Friday.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
What are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, it's kind of bizarre how, like, this holiday of consumerism is kind of been placed in by capitalists really conveniently after, well, you know, Thanksgiving has its own fucked up dark history.
Maybe we can look at Thanksgiving as part of the another rise of capitalism.
Well, it's right? Interesting. That's the inception of capitalism, right? You know, the very, very beginnings, and it started with, you know, destroying people's lands and stealing their resources.
Mass genocide.
And it's still happening.
And I mean,
something
that's what the
away.
economic system requires. And it's interesting that, like, people harken back to a better day of capitalism when it's always been brutal. And now, the day after Thanksgiving, which kind of hallmarks a really fucked up history of genocide, you have Black Friday, which, I mean, like, people go wild to get, like,
people literally have been killed.
Yeah.
Trampled on.
To get these deals for these commodities, which, you know, like, capitalists can afford to sell them for that cheap at pretty consistent basis.
Because people are being exploited in other areas.
Yeah, so it's this bizarre celebration without, I think, a lot of people realizing where these commodities come from and why we have a day after Thanksgiving that is exclusively about purchasing commodities, you know?
And one thing real quick, in case we haven't made this haven't been explicit about this, is I don't think we're necessarily trying to persuade, like, anyone of or I need you to be convinced right now. I think for me, part of the purpose of this is we're asking you kind of to think differently, right, about something, and this is something that's very complex, very difficult, kind of very tough pill to swallow. So we're asking you to think differently about something. And if you have more questions about it, definitely please ask. And do your own research too, right? I think that's something that y'all definitely said last time y'all were here, you were encouraging folks to do your own research.
Yeah.
And if you have any questions, please just feel free to reach out. Because what we're saying has very material consequences.
Yeah.
Right? Now, the show isn't just we kind of have a foundation of capitalism.
Yeah.
And we could kind of just talk about this for decades.
Yeah. Is everyone feeling okay about how we've discussed capitalism?
So, real quick, let's point out the main features that we kind of address. Let's do a little quick recap.
Yeah.
All right, so capitalism is an economic logic and ideology, right?
It's an economic system with its own ideology, for sure.
Okay, and some of the main features are
exploitation of the working class internationally by international capitalists. Another aspect is the constant imperative for growth and expansion, ever increasing. Always has to be growing or it fails as an economic system.
This has effects on the planet. It has effects on the people.
Yeah.
Climate change.
I mean, we just saw these horrible forest fires, right, in California. The constant reduction of human life to economic terms where people are just
your
sellable.
value is what you can produce or what you can contribute.
And if you can't do that, then you are of no value.
Yeah.
In other words, there's a value just put on your body.
Yeah.
Privatizing.
Yeah, the privatization of everything, and we're seeing that now, especially because capitalism is in crisis and reaching for these markets. So something like healthcare, which might have been an option for like public healthcare or universal healthcare, that might have been an option in the past. I don't think capitalists are going to let that shit fly because they need that market. They need that profit at this point. They're not going to give it to anybody for free. Same thing with education, right?
Yeah.
We're seeing Betsy DeVos especially really, really push for charter schools, for privatizing public schools with public funds,
Yeah.
You're getting a compliment over here from Hot Nalik, saying she's so on point.
Oh shit, thank you.
Right. One struggle saying a simple way to put it, capitalism imperative is to literally expand profit or die.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great way just to kind of sum that part of the show up.
Yeah.
Because we're also talking about Trump tonight.
And fascism.
And fascism. So let's kind of hit fascism. What is fascism?
So fascism is still capitalism. It's just a political and ideological form capitalism takes to deal with crisis. What we say, capitalism is in crisis right now because of climate change, because of limited resources, because of the natural expansion of capitalism bumping up against the physical limits of the world, of the planet, of us, of labor, of markets, everything. It's a feature of it is autocratic governments. It's an approach to keep the economic engine of capitalism chugging along so that profit continues to be made.
At any cost.
At any cost, human, environmental, no matter what. We can look back to Nazi Germany as a time when fascism really came into the forefront. This came on the heels of the 1930s, the crash of Wall Street, of the Great Depression. And that was a time when we spoke about finance capital. That was a time when finance capital was really...
It's in its heyday.
Yeah, in its heyday. And it was making a lot of money for a lot of people, but it eventually collapsed because it wasn't tied to anything real, and it was just consuming everything.
Those commodities that we talked about, it's not attached to any real tangible good.
Glad I hear saying definition of fascism is the brutal form capitalism takes to deal with crises.
Yeah, which is what we're saying.
Right? That's kind of what you're encapsulating what you're saying. Now, what are because this word fascism, this term, has just been thrown around, right, by so many people recently, people that I talked to, social media, the academy. Can we kind of give like some material examples of what fascism looks like?
Yeah, for sure. So, okay, that's the thing about these kind of political ideas is that, like Nazi Germany is never going to be the US today. It kind of adapts and changes to whatever context it's in. But some hallmarks of it is like extreme authoritarianism, and the acceptance of that authoritarianism. Extremely divisive politics, blaming of immigrants, poor folks,
scapegoating,
and also privatization. Nazi era Germany, they had so many economic programs, but all of them were based on privatizing, mass privatization of any kind of public industry. from buses to transit schedules. They privatized fucking everything. And also kind of the gutting of what was like kind of thought of as like governmental institutions. So like if we look at something like the EPA, which has been like just gutted. It doesn't have any teeth. The Environmental Protection Agency. So if we look at some of these qualities and translate it to our current moment, and understands that this is an alternative for capitalists, not for us, not for people, it is offered to lots of people. I think people who previously might have been taken care of by capitalism. So like lots of white folks, working white folks, who feel like, man, my grandfather was able to fucking work and pay his bills and live happily, and now I can't. And capitalism offers this very nice alternative of, it's the fault of immigrants, it's the fault of liberals. And that's something that fascism does really, really effectively, and it is tied to capitalism. I feel like I'm going off on a tangent here.
No. Again, this is a very complicated thing that we're trying to break down.
Yeah.
And I think one of the beautiful parts of Woke Wednesdays is having young people think through their ideas and talk about things that are very complex and things that we are knowledgeable on, but obviously still are working through. And I think that's something that all of us can kind of relate to. So I don't think it's a tangent. I think you're doing your thing. I think both of y'all are doing your thing.
Thanks.
So here's a complicated thing. So again, please feel free to ask questions if you're not understanding something, or please feel free to post comments. But at its kind of root, fascism, I guess, is extremely authoritarian. It's authoritarian.
Yeah.
That word. I'm telling you that word. Oh, English. I blame capitalism. Extremely authoritarian, right? And also dehumanizing in the way that it's constantly, again, marketizing everything, all of our social interactions. Right, and I think a great example that you gave is just Nazi Germany.
Yeah.
All right. Is that cool?
Yeah, for sure.
We're kind of getting there.
Yeah, and I think again we should make really clear that fascism is an alternative for capitalism when it's in times of crisis, because you need that authoritarianism to arrange society so that people have to pay for everything, so that people are divided, and so that capitalism can thrive even if it has to be with a chokehold, over the population.
So this is interesting because I guess I have a question. Sometimes we talk about capitalism or these huge systems as if they were like a person, right? So that that darn
goddamn capitalism.
It's just doing all this stuff to us, and I think when we talk about it as a system, we mean that it is kind of this organic being that is just kind of just living on its own at this point.
Yeah.
Right? And it's just kind of just procreates and just proliferates.
Yeah. I mean, it is really like every kind of like being within evolution wants to ensure its own reproduction. And political and economic systems are no different. So there is no mastermind behind capitalism. It's reproducing itself, and it does what it has to do to reproduce itself, and that's absolutely true. It has its own needs, its own imperatives, and it will make sure that those are met.
And part of it is that it becomes kind of this like subconscious common sense logic for us. Like we're just so complicit in it sometimes that we don't even realize sometimes it's hard to kind of get away from, right?
Yeah.
And we can, in a way, we also perpetuate it.
For sure.
Anytime you see a sale going on, hey,
No, dude, and I mean that feeling of like I'm guilty of it. Like, I just bought a dress. I feel fucking great. Like, why is that the psychology? Like, it's horrible.
I love Jordans. I love Jordans. I love them. Real quick, let me read this. So Hale's saying Trump is not even a capitalist or a fascist. He is full, just blown crazy. One struggle is saying Trump is not crazy. He knows exactly what he's doing.
Yeah.
Trump is a fascist alternative that capitalism offers us in the moment of crisis. This is a very interesting kind of comment. As far as one struggle is saying, Trump is not crazy. He knows exactly what he is doing. Trump is the fascist alternative that capitalism offers us in the moment of crisis. So can y'all kind of nodding? Can y'all kind of break that down a little bit for us?
Like Trump didn't just spring out of nowhere. It wasn't like, oh yeah, like this fucking orange dude sounds great to the United States right now. There was kind of a historical buildup, And he's not crazy. He knows exactly what he's doing. He is a fascist. And he may play it off like he's a fucking windbag, but consecutively and consistently, he makes decisions that are in the interest of the specific party of a capitalist class, you know, or a specific portion of the capitalist class, which is that return to fucking industrial capital, which is what that was the fascists in Nazi Germany too. They said, fuck finance, fuck all of that. We have to return back to industrialism.
And that's when he's talking about bringing jobs back to the United States that have been sent to Mexico or elsewhere. But those jobs are not going to come back.
Yeah, and I mean, he's not an accidental racist, you know? He doesn't just say horrible things about black and brown people because he's just fucking a racist. That's a hallmark of a divisiveness that fascism requires to make others less than, to make others the problem, instead of blaming the economic system which has failed all of us, you know?
Divide people so they don't organize against.
So in a way, is this like a new wave of fascism that the United States is seeing? Because for at least 100 years, I believe that the illegal immigrant was created like in the 1920s, right, within the American government. So this may be like some type of just kind of fascism, or new iteration of it.
I would say so, especially you look at fucking in Little Rock, Arkansas. It was a week ago. A bunch of National Socialists gathered in Arkansas and burned a swastika. Look at Charlottesville. That was really recent too. And the increase of hate crimes and the increase of these really, really reactionary fascist right-wing organizations that are flexing their muscles because fascism is on the rise and Trump is a fascist. And he's there to embolden fascists.
So, a question. So we're kind of pointing out explicit forms of oppression, right? These like burning of swastikas. This is very explicit. So we just, okay, that's racist. But what about these implicit forms? Like the systems that kind of seem invisible to people. Can we also kind of attribute fascism to that? Or is that just within the context of capitalism?
Well, I think it all, like, basically can be attributed to this economic arrangement of capitalism, right? Because it is predicated on exploitation. But a lot of this stuff, we're in a moment where it's extreme. It's extreme capitalism. Fascism is like capitalism on steroids. It'll do anything to make sure it survives. So, like, you know, that trope of, like, those goddamn immigrants has existed for a very, very long time, just as a part of capitalism and people, you know, like, defending what they perceive as their class interests. But now it's at a point where I really do think it is indicative of, like, a fascist rise. What do you think, Austin?
Yeah, it's definitely an ideological tool that the capitalist class uses to divide people and prevent them from thinking anything else, from organizing against capitalism. I mean, because capitalism is in crisis and it's decomposing in front of our eyes and it's very tenuous right now. What can happen? And any sort of organization, whether it be labor organization, any sort of anti-racist, any sort of cultural organization is a threat to capitalism right now.
So Sohail is asking, if this is the case, why do so many poor white folks kind of abide by this logic? If this is the case, and I'm sorry I can't read the question verbatim because I closed out, but I think that's the question. Why do so many folks, poor people especially, kind of abide and support Trump if he is?
It's an easy answer. It's a something tangible. You can say, oh, look, it's that guy stole my job. A Mexican came into the country and stole my job, when in reality it's the capitalist class seeing that they can pay that person less than you. You should be mad at the capitalists.
Yeah, exactly. It's the divisiveness that capitalists have always kind of used. I totally forgot what I was going to say.
It is interesting though, because I think, so on the show obviously we've talked about systemic forms of oppression, racism, patriarchy, you know, whatever, heteronormativity. Like it seems that oftentimes we kind of get stuck on the individual, like the scapegoating of the one person, as opposed to a system that creates or
that requires
right. So it's very interesting how we kind of get caught up in this. So what do you think is kind of a reason that people kind of, well, I think you said it, Austin, just now, that it's kind of an easy way, right? It's kind of an easy blame.
Yeah, it's easier than understanding how capitalism works. If you try to explain to that to someone, they're like...
Yeah, well, I mean, like, the reality is people are living their fucking lives and trying to struggle.
Absolutely.
And, like, you know, like, we're very fortunate that, I guess, we're involved somewhat in academia and, like, a political life. But for most people who are just, like, trying to live, they don't have time to sit down and dissect what capitalism is, much less organize it. And it is scary to think, wow, this entire paradigm is not for me. It works against my interests, and it's not something that I can blame on any individual or a population. Right. It's the economic system and the people who run it. That is a really, really hard thing to realize. Yeah. And
it's a hard
scary
thing to see, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a hard thing to kind of grapple with. It's easier to blame the person that you see.
Yeah.
Than the person that you don't.
Yeah.
Right? Or the system that you don't. It's amazing how this invisibility of systems is just the dangers of it. Because in a way they're very visible because we see poverty, mass poverty, right? Exploitation. But yet it's also invisible because it's kind of hard to kind of put your hand, kind of touch the system. Yeah. As opposed to the person.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's also something that I think, like, this kind of discourse or analysis is not something that we're necessarily taught. I think, previous in our history, especially in the United States, we have a strong history of organizing and resisting capitalism. And I think it's something that we might have been better at a few generations ago. Yeah. But that historical memory and that historical practice has also been lost, too. Mm-hmm. So, like, and especially, like, rural folks, what's that, Harlan County, USA, like, those people were militant and they had their, like, necks up against a wall because of mining companies that were exploiting the hell out of them. And people will talk shit about, like, oh, these, like, white folks who are rural and don't know anything. Those same people used to fight, like, mercilessly against capitalism for their piece of the pie. And now capitalism doesn't care if they fight for it. Fucking, they can't give it to them. They can't have that piece of the pie.
And the interesting is that, like, this is also racialized.
Yeah.
Right? Because you can fight for your piece of the pie. Yeah. Because you believe that power can be shared in a pie type way, right? When actually, if you actually were to understand this more, you would realize that we're all in this together, right? Yeah. And so real quick, some people are mentioning white supremacy. Yeah. Right, and we kind of talked about this a little bit before the show, that kind of white supremacy was kind of conceived through capitalism. Yeah. Right. So a lot of these concepts that we kind of know, and not obviously, but a lot of things can be reduced to kind of capitalism, like patriarchy and all these forms. Yeah. I think part of it is that they're just all related. Yeah. In some type of way, right?
Yeah, and I don't know that necessarily those systems of oppression were produced by capitalism, but capitalism absolutely requires them to exist.
It benefits from them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, and I think also in a weird way where, like, you know, historically it's been for division of labor or to keep, like, you know, like a heel on some populations and oppress them. And I think even more now, to divide people who might have the same interests and align with each other against the people who run this economic system. And that's really dangerous and scary too.
So this is so horrible. Right, y'all have outlined for sure why this is just so egregious and just so threatening to human life. Why aren't folks doing anything about it? Are they just lazy? Are they just stupid?
No.
What's wrong with them? Like, there's clearly something wrong with them.
No, I don't think it's anything wrong with people. I think this is it's hard and it's scary to kind of question things. Mm-hmm. And think that maybe this world is fucked up inherently and that it has been for a long time and there's never been a really nice period of time where things were working out great for everyone. That's a scary thought to accept. And also, you know, like, again, people are living their lives. So, like, while Austin and I, we're organizers, we're members of One Struggle. So it is, you know, like, we feel it is our job to meet with people and to discuss these ideas and get people involved in some kind of political organization. Not everybody has the time for that shit, and a lot of people don't, realistically, I hate to use this word, they don't have the capacity for it. They could. Oh. But also, it's not about inherent capacity, but, like, we aren't trained to do this anymore. We don't know how to work in a collective. We don't know how to organize collectively in our interests.
Which is also a byproduct of capitalism.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which trains us to view ourselves as just like solely individuals.
Yeah.
Right? It's a difference between individualism and individuality.
Yeah.
Right? So individuality can be more like, hey,
everyone's different. Nobody's the same.
Everyone's different. Exactly. Space, whatever.
Yeah.
But individualism is just it's very interesting. So I was teaching a class last semester at the university, and we would constantly ask students when we came into the class to put all their chairs in a circle. We did this for like 6 or 7 weeks straight. Every time we come in, put your chairs in a circle. Put your chairs in a circle. Put your chairs in a circle. And every time we would do this, they would only grab one chair, their own chair, and only put it in a circle.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I called them out like numerous times, and I used that example to kind of break down an aspect of capitalism, which is this individualism. The constant, I will only look out for myself.
Yeah.
I'm only going to bring my chair to the circle as if no one else needs a chair. Right? So it's an interesting example, but the point still stands. There's this constant individualism that we all kind of abide by. I'm look out for myself.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the ideology that capitalism has really, really effectively trained us in and kind of taught us to operate in. And that itself, too, is hard to, like, deal with or, kind of push back against.
Yeah, hard to break out of.
But the only way to think I do it realistically is through the political work. And that's kind of I think our gripe a lot of times with academics is that, like, it's great to talk about theory and, like, it's awesome if you've read every work that Marx has ever put out.
Where's your practice?
But, like, if you aren't doing something, if you aren't engaged in your community, in your school, if with the people around you, pushing them, organizing them, then all your ideas don't mean shit because they're not connected to any kind of reality.
So this is interesting because, like, I want to be an academic, right?
Me too. That's where we're both.
Right.
Allie and I both.
And all of us are within these spaces and circles, and I think some academics might argue that that's just not our thing. I'm not capable of doing that. I'm not good at that. But I can teach students.
Yeah.
Which will go on and kind of do other things. Do you think that maybe that's a cop-out? Or...
Yeah, I think it's an option that is nice and does not challenge the economic system in any way,
It keeps you comfortable.
Exactly.
Real quick, let me read. Clara said, individualism, a tool that is used to keep us scrambling for survival in a system that is inherently brutal and unequal. So Hale said individualism is a kind of human nature.
I disagree with that so much. I think the way that the way we evolved from Homo erectus to Homo sapien was because we're collective and social animals. And that is
all
how
I heard
we
was erected. I'm so sorry. I'm so
Get
sorry.
your mind out of the gutter.
Homo erectus.
That's all I heard. That's all I heard. Yeah.
And that's how we've kind of survived and evolved, like, from the inception of, like, what is humanity?
Yeah.
Is our social fucking activity. We're animals. We rely on each other. And I think we may live in a context now that's really heavily individualized and makes it seem like this is just how we are. But I really don't think that we are individualistic humans or animals.
You can see that in times of crisis. When natural disasters happen, what do people do?
They band together.
They band together and survive. I mean, they do what they have to do.
That's a great example. I think when we talk about forms of domination, forms of oppression, hegemony is a really interesting word that is always kind of thrown around. Kind of came out of this thought of Antonio Gramsci, this Italian man. And he was saying that part of domination is for us to kind of accept it as this common sense logic, like without even questioning it. And when we think about these type of things, thinking of things as just human nature, I think is a very dangerous thing to do. Yeah. I don't know if I believe in human nature.
Yeah, what is human
right?
nature?
Exactly. I think it definitely has a political agenda to it. And we've seen how historically that has been very dangerous. And I think we need to constantly question what is human nature, especially when it tries to take power over you.
Well, yeah, and I mean also, like, okay, so we're talking about capitalism today and how we hate it.
Sucks.
But I mean also, like, what is human nature was defined totally different under feudalism. Or under hunter-gatherer societies. So yeah, those kind of remarks that are like a little bit unnuanced of like, oh, that's just how humans are. That kind of stuff I really, really disagree with, and also doesn't give us the opportunity to ask more important questions.
And it doesn't hold up to reality.
Yeah.
You say a little more about that. I agree. I think one of the things that tonight we're trying to do is provide nuance.
Yeah.
To a very thing that is oftentimes this lacks nuance.
Yes, reality is complex.
Yeah.
It's really hard, you know?
I was just telling someone, if someone gives you a simple answer for like just reality or like for just everyday life, like I'm skeptical. Yeah, bullshitting, because seriously, like how do you give a simple answer?
Exactly. And I mean, that's like, we're talking about fascism and Trump, and that really is a lot of that political line. Like Turning Point USA, which I don't know if y'all are familiar, that from our perspective is a fascist organization that exists on most high school and university campuses. And yeah, they provide the most simple kind of like sound bites of socialism sucks, the best welfare is a job, and like these really, really kind of like boiled down ideas that don't actually stand for anything, but are just like really catchy and just kind of, yeah, like that thing of like, oh yeah, that's just human nature, you know, individualism is human nature. Those oversimplified answers to questions that are really, really complex. And that to me is kind of a mark of like fascism too, you know? And this goes hand in hand with that idea of like, okay, don't question why capitalism can no longer care for you and your family. Blame it on an immigrant, you know?
Real quick, because I think that's a very interesting question. But don't you guys think that greed is a universal trait? I'm not justifying capitalism, but I believe that greed is something that cannot be removed. This is interesting, and the reason I say it's interesting is because slavery, other times when we think about that, we think about it within the context of the United States. But slavery is nothing new to human just kind.
Yeah.
Right? It pre-exists capitalism.
Yeah.
And in a way that is a form of greed. Right? So I think this is a very difficult question. Real quick, I want to read something. So one story said, we are capable of greed just as we are capable of solidarity and cooperation.
Yep.
It all comes down to what the environment fosters and stimulates in us, or what the environment doesn't foster and what we push against.
Yeah.
Right? So what do you believe greed to be a part of just human nature?
No, and I think we were talking about how slavery existed. From my perspective, this is not the perspective of one struggle. To me, it's class-based societies. Anytime you have a social or political or economic arrangement that is based on class, there's always going to be a division that is unequal. And to me, I think like greed is a really, really simplified way of people, like hoarding resources or hoarding whatever is available within their current context, you know? I don't think it's necessarily inherently human. It does happen. And like Glada said, you know, like just like we're all capable of greed, we're capable of great courage and solidarity and collectivism too.
And caring for each other.
Yeah.
So in a way, it's like, let's focus on many of the things, the positive things especially, that we are capable of doing. Right? It's kind of easy to just kind of say, oh, all we can do is this. But there's so much more that we can also do. I love your example of what happens post a natural disaster. But like, there's also like the other part, right? That don't let any natural disaster go to waste. Whose book
That's
is that?
Capitalism.
For sure, right? So it's like the antithesis
or even
of kind of what we're talking about.
If you see how the state responds when people are banding together to help, they shut it the fuck down. Cops come in and like stop helping each other.
Please
Stop.
tell us what we were talking about Black Klansman that you kind of made me aware to.
Oh,
to the show.
We were talking about that film Black Klansman, and I don't know if y'all have seen Boots Riley's movie. Sorry to bother you, but Boots Riley saw that movie Black Klansman and put out this like really intense critique of it.
It was a new movie. I think it was a remake by Spike Lee.
Yeah.
Right? So Black Klansman, in case you haven't seen it.
And it's about this black cop and white cop kind of banding together to take out the KKK chapter that was local there. But what they leave
based
out...
on true story. In Arkansas.
But
right, Arkansas?
Yeah. But what they leave out is...
Colorado Springs. Sorry, Colorado. I just saw it 2 days ago. Yeah.
But what they leave out is that those folks who band together to take care of the KKK also band together to disorganize and disband like black leftist organizations, Black Panther organizations, and also white working organizations, and any kind of relationship that existed between those two organizations. You know, in addition to taking out the KKK, they fucked those people up too. And it's just a really shitty omission and kind of like a weird stroke of propaganda, especially at this political moment, you know, to make it seem like the cops are great. They're doing what they've always done, which is true, you know, like fucking things
serving
up.
and protecting.
Yeah.
But serving and protecting who?
Exactly.
All right. So we're running out of time. We have about 10-15 minutes left. I'm wondering if anyone else has any other questions, because I feel this is one of those episodes where we've addressed
a lot of shit.
A lot. And I think anytime we have an episode that addresses capitalism and any other topic that relates to that, it's going to be a lot to kind of just address and kind of swallow and think through. Is there anything that we missed?
I think discussions like this, you're like, yeah, okay, this is all wrong and messed up, so what do we do about it?
Then what do you do about a question?
There's an answer.
He's so cute.
We have to organize. I mean, we can't put our faith in politicians. We've seen this time and time again throughout history. They never serve working interests. They never serve anybody but the capitalist class. The irony is that Clara just literally just posted Ali and Austin. Can you talk about
let go of the reins a little bit, guys?
We got it.
We're okay.
Come on, one struggle.
One snuggle.
So question about this a little bit, because I've heard a lot of just in my circles of folks that there are a lot of folks out there that have been deemed as too woke, and they say, hey, don't vote, just don't vote. Doesn't matter, just don't do it. And then there are folks that say, hey, you can vote and also organize and be anti this and be anti that.
Yeah.
Where do y'all kind of stand on that?
I mean, like, for me as an individual, I feel very strongly that Republican and Democrat, it's the same class, and they represent the exact same interests with slight variations. So, like, for me, voting is not a big deal, but I also will not condemn anyone for voting. Our organization, though, we're not here to do the work of the fucking Democratic Party. That's not our job. Our job is to build an anti-capitalist combative resistance and raise class consciousness, not get Bernie Sanders elected. So, like, organizationally, that's where we stand. But also, like, we talk about this a lot, about like these gains that we've gotten historically, you know, whether it's like civil rights or women's suffrage or the 8-hour working day. That shit, we didn't get that because people wrote to their senators or people lined up to vote. It was because we had organized social forces and people demanded that shit. And so they got it because they had enough social force and power that they had to be listened to. So that's what we're talking about, I guess, kind of with organizing. And also, we were talking about this earlier, and this applies to those structures of oppression. Like, if we want a future society where those things are addressed with and disbanded, we have to start building that in our organizations now. Our organizations have to be embryonic of the world that we want. And that's a part of organizing too, you know?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I would just say that, like, what's missing from the current moment, you know, if you go back to the 60s when the Black Panthers were very prominent, you know, Fred Hampton and Bobby Seale and all them, they had a very explicit anti-capitalist line. They were saying, yo, black people are suffering because of the capitalist class. We're put in this position because we're being exploited. And a lot of that is missing nowadays. You have people telling you to go vote for a black politician or something, and it's like they're going to conform to the same system that they're entering.
Ooh, talk about that. Okay, go ahead.
This happens all throughout history.
Okay.
This happens all throughout history.
Austin. Okay.
The Black Panthers will tell you this.
And I mean, Dr. King was talking about this stuff too, right?
Yeah, especially towards when he was being pushed more left.
Malcolm X.
Malcolm. And I think that's such a great point. I think. So ironically enough, I had a Wednesday episode with the New Florida Majority, it was an Florida Immigration Coalition, and Dream Defenders, and they were on the show, and we were talking about, and they were very pro Andrew Gillum, and I was like, okay, we are romanticizing a person just based on racial identity.
Yeah.
Just because they're better than doesn't mean they're good. Right. And so it's very interesting how we kind of try to navigate this. And I love your point because in a way it's also kind of intersectional, right? It's not just identity politics based on one identity. We're talking about at a fundamental root level. This is based on the exploitation of people. Yeah. And sometimes it happens to look differently for racially different folks. Yeah. Right? This is very powerful what you're saying. It's definitely not pro-Democrat, pro-Republican, which I love what y'all are saying, but this is also hard for people to understand.
Yeah.
Especially in the United States. Because even to kneel is anti-democratic, and that means you hate the United States. Yeah. Right? So how do you respond to someone that's like, y'all are crazy?
I mean, I think if we just look at the reality, like, I think historically we've had this idea of like, yeah, we just got to get that one person in power. And a lot of people were so excited when Obama was elected. And like, that man deported more people than any president historically. And he killed so many people in Yemen. And we have someone who's in one struggle, who's a DACA student. And he was like, yeah, man, like under Obama, I was stoked because I got DACA. But also at the same time, there's women dying in Yemen by the same motherfucker that gave me, you know, like the ability to stay here. So what's the trade-off for my democratic rights, you know? Ooh. And I think that's a really interesting point.
And that's another point that serves a certain class of people. It's not everybody. Not all black people benefited from Obama. Yeah. A certain class of black people may have benefited from Obama. Certain racial categories that were of a certain class position were benefited by Obama, but that's...
y'all are talking interesting now.
Now you're about it.
I love great critiques. I love it. I'm here for all of this. But unfortunately, Instagram is not.
That's okay.
Damn it, capitalism Instagram. That's the next topic.
We need the people's Instagram. I don't know what that
we need the people's Instagram. But then you can't create it and then make money off of it.
How long my legs look.
Mine are longer.
I've never had long looking legs. Leg privilege over here. Alright, so thank y'all so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
Now, real quick, y'all didn't talk about One Struggle at all. What is One Snuggle? Struggle.
We are an anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist initiative in South Florida, and we work to organize individuals, no matter where you are from. We want to build political unity with you. We want to organize people to challenge capitalism. We want to build political consciousness and build class consciousness.
Because the only way we have a hope of confronting anything in our interests is if we're working on it and building that power now. Yeah. It doesn't come out of a vacuum. It takes a lot of work and people coming together, but we are so strong and we are so many. And the system doesn't work for most of us. It works for a very small number of people, and there's also a lot of us, and we're all fucking kind of awesome, so let's organize.
Yeah. Check out their page, please. It's called onestruggle.fiu. Yeah. So when are tryouts?
So, I mean, like, for real, if you have any questions about what we've talked about, or if you read through our material, like,
is it posted on your Instagram page? You have a website?
Yeah, we have a website and an Instagram.
Onestruggle.net.
Okay, good. I'm glad you know that.
All right.
But yeah, contact us if you're at FIU or in the Miami area and you have questions or want to discuss some of these ideas. We are always down and open to meet with people and talk and figure out ways that we can work together.
Is there an upcoming event or meeting or something?
We just had our last event of the semester.
I think we were going to try to do
we had 3 this semester.
What are you talking about? Y'all can't sit here and abide by capitalist calendars. y'all can't do this.
What is time?
What is this? Political capitalist agenda.
We will have more next semester.
I wanted to do this.
Oh wait, there's one Miami chapter is having an event December 2nd at Space Mountain.
Yeah, it says it's organized for what?
Sounds like a Disney ride. What is this?
It's a venue up in North Miami.
Little Haiti.
Okay.
It's an art place, and also they're letting us do a discussion called Organized for What? About capitalism, our current moment, what organizing means, and how we do it. And yeah, it's gonna be great.
Do y'all have a flyer that I can post?
Yeah, I'll
We
send
have it on
to
our
you.
Instagram.
Dope.
We have it on our
Please feel free to send it to me, and I'll definitely repost it.
Cool, thank you.
Thank y'all so much
Thank you.
for being here.
And thank you.
Always a pleasure having y'all on the show. Always welcome. Y'all, thank you so much to the folks who tuned in the entire time, because I know this was heavy, just dense stuff. This will be posted to our Instagram page. Please feel free to watch it. Also, people posting it to YouTube. If you have any questions, again, let us know. Feel free to follow onestruggle.fiu on Instagram, and then onestruggle.net on the interwebs. Internet. Thank y'all for tuning in. Thank y'all for being here.
Thank you so much.
And we'll see y'all next week.
Yay, Woke Wednesday. I love you.
Let me see here. How do you end this thing? There it is.